Welcome back, it's me Lou, and I'm here for another action figure review, but this time it is not an unboxing. This is going to be a mint on card review, and we are looking at this Ultima Online, and it's Blackthorn, the power-hungry tyrannical lord. This is made by McFarlane Toys, and it's a much older action figure. This came out in about, I think the copyright stamp said 2002. So I found this recently at my local half-priced books, and this was only like $9. I couldn't pass up on it. I'm very nostalgic for this period of time when it comes to action figures. And this is one of those action figures that just kind of really displays the artistry, which is McFarlane Toys. The work they produce is just amazing. Their sculpting is always beautiful, and I think this action figure really exemplifies that. Even though I'm not really familiar with Ultima Online, I think the game's popularity is long past. I couldn't resist just getting this action figure because, for one, it was super cheap, but also, I just love this period of time. So the focus nowadays on action figures is that everybody wants everything. You want action figures that are highly articulated, but at the same time you also want them to be super detailed. This action figure kind of represents an era where collectors more so were, I think, more concerned about keeping stuff mint on card. And, they weren't really about this. They were more about displaying stuff, but not necessarily taking them out and putting them on shelves. And this really kind of really represents that. And there's just so much about this that's awesome. Like, even though this thing isn't super articulated, you could tell that display was like was a major selling point of the way this thing's packaged. This isn't on a card at all. This is in a completely plastic sealed clamshell. There's no bubble that's going to accidentally fall off from the cardboard. This is just completely all plastic. It's two halves. There's a back half and a front half, and you can see they're stamped together and they're just sealed all the way around. So no air is going to actually come into this thing at all. The only thing you have to kind of worry about is this sun damage. Like, if this thing's out in the sun for like years, eventually this plastic will become brittle or yellow and crack. But otherwise, if you keep this like in a temperature controlled area and out of the sunlight, this thing's gonna last you forever. So, yeah, I don't know too much about this game. I remember when it was out. I'm more of a console gamer, especially around this time period. But McFarlane, they've been dabbling in video game stuff for a long time, and the quality of this action figure just really speaks for itself. Everything about it's amazing. The character design is so unique, and I don't know. It makes me kind of regret that I didn't collect this specific line of action figures when it first came out. I love the package design. It's great how this bubble kind of like this. You see the complete figure. So if you're a mint on card collector and you like to display stuff, you're gonna see everything. This thing's the window's completely open. The only thing that's kind of like blocking anything is this towards the bottom where it just has the Spawn.com logo. But otherwise, you can see the sides, the front. Unfortunately, you can't see the back, but just the way this thing's packaged, it allows you to see almost everything of the figure. You can hang this on a display, and it's beautiful how they have a up-close character portrait on the left, and this is the actual toy itself. It's not like a illustration. On the back, another up-close photo. So that's one of the amazing things I love about this time period too, is that even though fig photography is really big now and it's like super popular on social media, like a lot of the packaging you get like in the late 90s, early 2000s, so much of the package design, there was so much beautiful figure photography on it. They weren't shy about showing you up close all the details of the action figure. And on the back, we kind of have a lineup of some of the other Ultima Online action figures. and they all look beautiful. Yeah, I'm really regretful that I didn't collect this, when this line first came out. And the sculpting, back then, given it could easily match up to the sculpting of the figures today. As I mentioned at the start of the video, a lot of action figures nowadays, especially stuff like NECA, for example, they'll provide this high level quality of detail and paint application, but more so they'll give you the articulation. A lot of McFarlane stuff, especially during this time period, they're almost like miniature statues. And I remember there was some criticism from the fan base. People were like, we're just getting they're miniature statues. They're not necessarily action figures. But for me, during this time period, it's not like I'm too old to play with toys to begin with right now. But like when I was in college and post college, it's not like I'd play with these toys. I'd take them out and display them on shelves and stuff. And for me, it didn't really matter how I mean, for some toys, it did matter about their articulation. Like I also collected Star Wars figures around that time period, and for me, I always like to have my Star Wars figures, articulated. But for something like this, for me, it was more forgiving because I was more concerned about the displayability of it. And a toy like this, it's displayable on both fronts. You could display it loose and it looks amazing, or you can still keep it on card and it looks amazing. So I just really miss this style of packaging. I remember going into like Toys R Us's and just seeing like the Spawn line of action figures, and I was just loved looking at the toys and stuff, because even if I didn't buy them, it's like just seeing them on the shelves. They just felt like they're being like put on showcase just because of the way the package design. So I think McFarlane really pushed the envelope back then and like how to sell and market a figure. I mean, they raised the bar in terms of like paint application and sculpting, but even like something like this, they had the collector in mind, and it just clearly shows. So yeah, this is a beautiful figure. Let's examine it up close. So as you can see, everything is just really detailed. Starting at the head, you can see the scars and the stitching and the staples. All the sculpting and cuts are really deep. And I want to say, a figure like this back then, this was probably something that was possibly hand sculpted, maybe 2 up, and is reduced down. It's not like a lot of toys today where I think not everything, but I think there's a good majority of action figures where they're designed in 3D programs. But this, this is clearly displays the artistry of like the sculptors and how talented and skilled some of these artists are. They could take something that's from a video game and just really bring it to life in terms of action figure form. If you look up here, like you can see his chest armor is amazing. You can see all the different metal plates and the rivets. There's all the tubes and hoses. It looks like there's probably some limited articulation, like maybe his head actually turns. And looking underneath, it looks like his arm could probably rotate up and down. And same with this robot arm with the big pincer. It looks like the elbow might be articulated. There's a nice, beautiful micro texture on the cape. I'm not sure if the camera's catching it. And, for as much as I love these action figures, they could be very fragile, too. A good number of my Spawn action figures from back in the day, they might have been hyper detailed like this, but, the plastic could just be a little bit more brittle. Joints might break. But, I mean, this is that's true for a lot of toys, but I think when you reach a certain level of like, detail, I think they require much more rigid plastics, and they're not as pliable, and they're more prone to breakage. And I think you see that some of that with some of the like NECA action figures. Like I've heard people complain that like some of the Predator toys, those are super hyper detailed, but I've heard those could like sometimes break. But yeah, this is really beautiful. Now this guy doesn't have like a full, humanoid body. He just has an upper torso, which is kind of like buff. But then his lower half is kind of like this weird, like, inverted pyramid kind of deal. Yeah, you see the veins and the forearms. So everything about this is just really detailed. If you have like a secondhand or like vintage toy shop next to you, I highly suggest that if you didn't grow up during this period of time, or if you weren't collecting action figures during this period of time, take the time out to look at some of the older stuff, especially the things put out by McFarlane Toys or even NECA. The stuff they produced, especially in this, NECA also produced action figures and released them in similar package. Where it's just completely plastic clamshells. If you ever seen these kind of style of action figures, just take the time to look at them, and you might actually find something that you think's worth buying, because a lot of this stuff is just really beautiful, and it's also just a good like history lesson about action figures and action figure design and toy engineering and how far stuff has gotten. So yeah, this is, I think, more of this me taking a trip down memory lane than an action figure review. But I hope you found it informative, and if anything, I hope it at the very least makes you want to go out and actually like hunt down some of the more vintage toys, because they're some of them you can find pretty cheap, others might be a little bit more pricey, but during this time period, the quality and level of detail and that they went into these action figures was just second to none. So let's wrap this up. Once again, my name is Lou. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Feel free to stop by anytime. Take care.